Welcome back to the BDO Accessibility Spotlight. My name is Mandy Crespo, and I'm a manager of accessibility consulting services at BDO Canada. I'm a middle-aged female with brown shoulder-length hair. I'm wearing a bright pink blazer today with a black shirt underneath of it, and I have a huge smile on my face. I'm very privileged to work alongside the host of the BDO Accessibility Spotlight, Max Bro. Max is the Vice President of Accessibility Consulting here at BDO Canada. He's made it his life's mission to advance accessibility for persons with disabilities, and he has made very huge impacts in accessibility nationwide. So I'm very honored to get to introduce Max and work with him every day and learn from his expertise and passion. Welcome, Max.
Thank you, Mandy. That was awesome. I am a gentleman who is in middle age with gray hair, gray beard. I'm wearing glasses that are circular in nature, that are blue. I'm wearing a black top with a really kind of funky bow tie that has a little bit of orange, a little bit of gold and black. Sitting in my home office where I have some stuff around, like Star Wars picture and some Ken doll. Today I'm really excited. I get to bring on a close friend of mine who I don't have the frequency to talk to a lot about geopolitics and accessibility. So here it is. I'm going to introduce you to Dr. Dan Samash. I think this is the first time I ever said publicly you're a doctor. He is an assistant professor of employment relations studies at Queen's University. His studies and his career success and workplace inclusion of persons with disabilities include three aspects. One is leadership emergence of persons with disabilities. Two, disability stigma and social identity. That's a big one. Three, workplace inclusion of persons with disabilities. I can tell you, one person can just focus on not one, he's focusing on three. Dan applies a multi-method approach to his research using both quantitative and quantitative methods. His research is applied and practical applications for individuals, organizations, and policymakers. Dan is teaching interests include disability inclusion at work, workplace inclusion more broadly, HR analytics, organizational behavior, applied research and methods. Prior to joining the Employment Relations Unit at Queen's University, Dan was a postdoctoral research fellow with the Center of Industrial Relations and Human Resources at the University of Toronto and the Institute of Work and Health. He completed his PhD as an organizational behavior at Queen's University. We are going to put some links to his recent works that just came out, some articles. And I would like to say that as this winter 2024, Dr. Samash will be having one of the classes at Queen's University that's going to be on disability in the workplace, titled Disability and Work. Dr. Samash, glad you're on board.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So, Dan, I gotta be honest with you. Can I call you Dan, or do you want me to call you Doctor?
Either one works, but Dan is preferred.
So, given the wide range of topics available for research and writing, what inspired your decision to focus on the field of persons with disabilities in the workplace?
Yeah, so before getting into that, too, I'll just introduce myself in appearance. So I'm an early 30s male. I have brown hair that's medium length with a beard and glasses on. My background is nowhere near as exciting as Max's. It's just kind of a gray backdrop, and then I'm on a green couch right now. So in terms of the question, how I got into this field, studying disability and studying disability in the workplace especially, for me, it began with personal experience and then broadened out well beyond that. But during my early days of my graduate school, I experienced a kind of neurological disability, an episode of one, and I took a medical leave from my studies and I returned to my work, very excited to get back into things, to maybe use a little bit of assistive technology to make that work, but more than fine and ready to go. And I realized that there were some social barriers around me that I was starting to experience that I wasn't expecting to encounter. So I asked what I think many people do in similar situations, which is, how do I navigate this? At the time, I was a PhD student. I still wanted to become a professor someday. And so I asked, how does someone navigate these issues? And what I saw when I did the kind of academic literature search into this was, okay, we have research on how do you lead people with disabilities, and what are all of the seemingly or often really insurmountable barriers that people encounter. Both of which can be very meaningful topics, but we were missing a lot of this, hey, how does someone actually succeed? So that was the moment where, for me, I said, okay, well, this is the research that I can do. I can contribute this, tiny little piece to this broader dialogue, this broader conversation.
Well, that's like when I was introducing you, those are three really big fields just to study on. I think anybody in your field could just make a reputation on just one of those. So you're really, going for it. So congratulations on that. And as I always say, I'm very interested in your future academic work. But, to me, not being in academia and going through university and doing what most people do to get somewhere in life, there wasn't a lot of programs or courses on understanding disability or just talking about social dynamics in any kind of, way. When it comes to persons with disabilities, it seems to be gaining some recognition within the post-secondary institutions. Do you view this as a passing trend, or what are some of the lasting developments of this? Do you see this staying, and how is this going to evolve?
Yeah, I think it's very hard to predict what will come next. But I do think the changes that we're seeing are very hopeful and very exciting. I think we do have the potential for really focusing on disability, focusing on questions around accommodation, focusing on disability inclusion, focusing on equity and fairness in various types of organizations. I think seeing it in the educational institutions is really exciting because this is often the first place where, these developments can occur, and then they can diffuse to other organizations and places. And, in the case of the course that you mentioned on disability inclusion in the workplace, we have these great undergrads here at the university, and many of them in our program in employment relations are going to move on to positions in labor relations, human relations, various other roles where they have really critical decision-making capacity. So I think it's a really nice opportunity for us to see this happening within the educational institutions and then building out into all of the other facets of our society. And of course, it's coming from other areas too. And
I'm going to change up question into 3 because you kind of answered that one in this one. Where do you see this eventually evolving? Like, do you see a lot of work and academia really starting to change society, both from a student point of view, because eventually those students will enter into the workplace and then they'll take their knowledge from what they've learned from your courses and start applying it. But are you seeing some actual, what I would say, systemic changes, like big, studies on this way of thinking? And I gotta be honest with you, folks who are listening to me. Dan came up with an academic paper about 6 months ago, I would say, and it really brought in a really interesting aspect to it. And it basically said, more an organization embraces accommodating people, the more that people accept accommodations as a standard of the workplace. And I'm minimalizing what his academic paper said, but that's what it said. And are you seeing that kind of work is going to influence change?
Yeah, so I think it has the potential to. It depends to an extent about how we share this work, who we share it with, and also who we do the work with, right? I think we're seeing a shift in many parts of academia, which is a really good one, where it's not always okay anymore to just do your research on your own, come up with your findings, and then move on. Often in the research that we're doing, and in the really impactful research that I see, we start talking to people. So maybe it's people with lived experience. So as an example, we're doing a study now on the school to work transition for persons with disabilities. And in that case, if we want to really understand how can people access these career advancing jobs, from that point of the school to work transition, well, we need to be talking to people who have lived experience of disability. We need to be talking to employers. We need to be talking to service providers who help with employment services. We need to be talking with accessibility services, with career services at post-secondary institutions, as well as many other actors. So when research begins in that place of, hey, let's talk with people, let's just be one kind of actor within this system, then I think we can come up with these, studies and findings that are really, really embedded in what's happening today. And then we do have the potential to, go out afterwards and say, hey, here's what we found. Can you implement this? Can this be used? Can this be diffused through our society? And I think there's a lot of potential there, but of course it's always uncertain what will actually come of it.
Well, if we don't experiment, we don't get to the root cause of why certain things exist, why they exist, right? Mm-hmm. And Dan, thank you very much for being on my show today. I much appreciate it, and I hope to see your progress in the years and the decades to come. I'm going to be always an enthusiastic reader of all your work and been following your career for a long time.
Thanks.
So as you saw, the academic world is now starting to embrace persons with disabilities. And where it really gets me excited is seeing the work of people like Dr. Dan Samash getting involved. Because Dr. Dan Samash is really looking at this from a very, very simplistic point of view for a person with a disability about what is our impacts in society as well. But what he's really asking is a fundamental question. What do we need to do to be successful as people with disabilities in the workplace? And I think that's a question that's never really asked a lot. And I think Dan is going to find those answers. And I advise everybody to keep an eye on his work, see where he comes from, and see some of the solutions he has. And again, with academia jumping on board, with corporations jumping on board, and with governments jumping on board, all I see is a great future ahead for people with disabilities in this great country. Thank you for attending. See you at the next show.